Hey! We're going to move right along with the Underdark series, and this week I'm going to show you some epic boss lair terrain that I cooked up. Now before you go any further, be sure to watch the previous episodes in this series and then come back to watch this one. Okay, so this story actually begins last year when I sculpted, molded, and then casted an anatomically correct human skull. This was a really fun project. I got to learn a lot from doing it, and for this one, I'm using one of the failed expanding foam castings that I had left over. Now, obviously, you could just go get a skull from your local Halloween store rather than going through all this effort. But anyway, I started out by cleaning up some of the inside of my skull and popping out the eyes and the nose. My plan here was to have it hollow so I could put a light inside of it for a little extra eeriness in-game. Using black foam board, I start sizing up and beveling down the edges so that the skull just fits onto it. I normally would just use some cardboard for something that's this size, but since every other piece in the series has black foam board, I may as well keep the theme going. Once the base is the right size and shape, I can very carefully shave some foam off of the skull so that it sits on the base in a more dynamic sort of pose. If I just place it flat down, the whole piece will look static, and considering that it will just be the skull on some stones, it needs to have a little more movement. Okay, so to keep this as simple as possible, I'm using a dollar store tea light for some glowing effects inside of the skull. The light looks super bright to the point where you can see it illuminating from the foam. So using a little bit of hot glue, I attach parchment paper around it, which will help me diffuse the light. I can always remove the parchment paper later if I want to change anything. And to cut a hole in the base, I'm temporarily attaching the skull so I can see where the tea light needs to be put. Tracing it on the bottom and then cutting out a hole that's a nice tight fit for the tea light. To make some larger stones, I'm using chunks of bark that have been sanitized and then baked in an oven to prevent anything gross from growing on my terrain. I cut the bark down to smaller chunks, and then I can start filling some pieces here and there until I find an arrangement that works. With hot glue, I attach the larger chunks to the base, and with PVA, I attach on the scraps that broke off from cutting the bigger pieces. Finally, some more PVA and sand to finish up this base. While I make the smaller bases for these accent pieces, I just want to say that if you enjoy these videos, you should hit the like button so I know. And if you want to see me make more, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss future episodes. These purple flowers that I'm using also come from my local dollar store. Even if you can't find these exact ones, I'm sure you could get something similar. Using a mini, I cut them down to size so they could offer a little bit of cover for any wandering adventurers or adversaries. Then I can attach my favorite plaster stones and make some marks to remind me where I want to attach the flowers later with glue. And with that, the build portion of this project is finished. Now, we're not reinventing the wheel here with the paint for these bases. After a heavy black base coat and giving it some time to dry, I do a dry brush of titanium white on the areas that should be lighter, a brown wash over the base, and a few last touch-ups with some dry brushing. Next, I punch a deeper hole into the base using a small screwdriver. And using my hot glue gun, I can take my time attaching each bushel of flowers onto their bases, and these guys are totally done. Now for the skull and its base. I painted the base black again, but also tried my best to get the inside of the skull painted black as much as possible. One day I plan on investing in an airbrush to help me with tight spots like this, but as of right now, I'm not much of a painter anyway, so I'll just struggle through. While the skull is already close to the final color that I want, I still hit it with an antique white. I need more paint on it to stop the light from coming through. Then I just added a couple of messy washes over the surface and lightened it back up again with some dry brushing. I usually go through this process multiple times on every project until I find the look that I'm after, or at the very least, something close to it. And as much as I'm sure you'd enjoy an 8-hour long, uninterrupted paint video, I'll just keep it to the basics. Finally, I can move on to the part that I've been looking forward to most, covering this thing with flock. In the end, I kinda overdid it, using 5 different types of flocking. To be fair though, 2 of them are just some teas that I didn't really like. I think normally to sell this effect of having a giant skull on the ground, it should be totally overgrown with moss and vegetation. However, that implies that this creature has been long dead, and in my world, these titans aren't extinct yet. I took my time applying moss to places where I think moisture would collect on the piece, and also to help hide the crimes of bad paint and other mistakes that I made while constructing this project. This is easily my favorite piece of terrain that I've ever made, period. And that really helps with the fact that the tea light doesn't actually look that great on camera. But anyway, I'll see you all next week when we make a monster fit for this lair. Bye!